Welcome to HeartTalk, the Global Influencer Podcast series. This is Senela, the founder and CEO of Women Empowered Global. HeartTalk is a global podcast where we go deep with influential global speakers and business leaders from around the world who are driving change, transforming people and business, and making an impact at a global level. And if you want to take your life to the next level, then this is the podcast for you. And with me today on this episode of the Heart Talk Global Influencer Podcast is Catherine Molloy. Welcome to the podcast, Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Catherine is the author of The $1 Million Handshake. Catherine Molloy is an Australian keynote speaker, communication expert. She works globally, specializing in sales, service, and leadership. With 25 years of experience in business training and facilitation, Catherine believes in creating effective, engaging learning environments through powerful communication techniques. She has also immersed herself into the fields of communication and body language psychology. She is also the director of Auspac Business Advantage, which is a soft skill training company working globally, and previously as head of CPD Oxford Partnership, Saudi Arabia, and many, many other accolades to Catherine. So with that, Catherine, I'm very excited for our listeners today to get to know you more deeply. Catherine, can you share with us what has been the journey of your success?
Well, you know, it's interesting because there's sort of two things in life that catapult us. We either do things because of inspiration or we do things because of desperation. Unfortunately, my success journey started 10 years ago through desperation. My husband fell ill and we had a business. We had 18 staff, and I woke up one morning and he has never been back to work. So I had to go in and run the business and take it over, and it was a really, really tough time. I'll never forget just waking up and seeing my husband that morning, and I just knew that nothing in life was ever going to be the same. I had no idea it was going to be such an amazing journey with so many lessons along the way. But that's what happened. It happened through desperation. Excuse me. I've been talking for the last 3 days on stage. Yeah, so it started through desperation because I didn't want to lose everything. It was the GFC, and I actually turned the business around in the following 6 months. But my husband said, if we don't, if we don't sell it, he won't get better, because even having it was making him anxious. So we sold the business, but he didn't get better. And then we had no jobs. We had to sell all our properties because they were tied up to our business as investment. So we lost over $1 million. And, you know, I went back to, well, what was I great at in life? And I loved customer service. I loved sales. So I thought, well, training in that would be awesome. But there weren't any jobs. So I actually started my own training company just by myself. And I'll never forget going for my first interview for a new client, and he actually wanted to work for me in a training company, not actually train his staff. So I left that feeling a little dejected, and my husband was with me. We traveled 50 minutes, and I put on a suit for the first time in 20 years for this meeting. And I remember sitting at this cafe. I said, let's have a coffee, and I saw Harvey World Travel, and I thought, well, they might do training. So I went into them, and they'd already had two training companies there that day. They were making a decision on who to go with. So they sat with me, and I went through everything, and they signed up with me. And of course, my company had just started. But, you know, I have this thing from many years ago, meet me, like me, trust me. And I truly believe that through our body language, we communicate so much. So this client wanted her people to come through the training with me. She signed up 30 people at $3,000 a head. I was doing training for 8 months, once a month. And not only that, she then recommended me to the other Harvey World Travel. So by the end of the day, I had around my first 50 students.
Oh, wow.
So that was very, very, yeah, very, very exciting. And what I learned was, even though technology's changed, even though everything else on this planet has changed, people haven't. So all the ladies out there thinking, how do we keep up with technology? How do we keep up with everything? People haven't changed. So when you understand the raw behavior styles of people, you can connect and communicate with anyone, anywhere. And about 5 years ago, I started speaking internationally. I was in China working. Within 2 days, I had business there. Apparently, that's pretty unheard of. But once again, it's understanding people, being emotionally intelligent and culturally smart. So my business took off from there, and I'd already grown it over those 5 years. I signed over $1 million in my first year of business. And then from there, the business grew. We had 18 staff on the Sunshine Coast and 36 trainers around Australia. But then I discovered I wasn't doing exactly what I loved doing, which was working with people for great results and working with businesses. I'm really good at seeing gaps and what we can do to increase and grow the business. So I started speaking, and I found I loved it because I could share so much with so many and impact. Instead of a room of 20, I was now impacting. I think my largest audience so far has been 3,500 people. So, yeah, it took off from there. And I think that's been my journey of success, starting from absolutely nothing and turning it into a business that was absolutely scalable and saleable after 5 years. And now I'm an international speaker and I work globally. But life doesn't always give you lemonade, does it? We get a lot of lemons along the way. I did start life as an orphan. I was left in Australia from a mother from overseas, and I was adopted here. But unfortunately, my mum died when I was 16, and I lost my father after that as well. So it sort of almost went back to being orphaned again. And, you know, I really learned that you have to believe in yourself.
Wow, Catherine, just hearing your story. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes. Go ahead, Catherine.
I think that I'll leave the next question up to you, or maybe you've got a question around that.
No, you said some very interesting things. You said, meet me, like me, trust me. And then you also said, tech changes, but people haven't. And I think that's very profound. I mean, especially in today's marketplace. You know, going back to how you said your journey started, you said it's either inspiration or desperation. The thing, what I've seen about human beings, Catherine, I know you'd have a lot of experience to add to this point because of your psychology background, is that when people have desperate moments, not everybody chooses the higher ground to come out of it. So what was your personal experience that really drove you taking that point of desperation into a positive light? Like what was your thought process that we could tell others to sort of, you know, shadow?
I wanted to save my family. I didn't want to have to pull the children out of the schools they're in. I didn't want to lose our house. And I am born with one of the behavior styles that my cup is half full. So I have a little bit of an advantage to somebody who looks at it with their cup half empty. My husband's more the cup half empty. And so I had to have a strong belief in myself, even though my husband, unfortunately, at that time said I couldn't do it. That was also something else that spurred me into doing it, because if someone says I can't do something, then I have to prove that I can. So it is a mindset. It is a definite mindset. Whatever you think is right, and if you think you can't, you can't, and if you think you can. So I guess if I could say anything to the listeners out there, when we are faced and we're pushed into those tough corners, whatever you think at that time will be right. But if you want to come out successful, you've got to flip that switch. You've got to get into a positive mindset. And one of the things that happened for me when I started, because I think women are a little bit more like this, 10% of anything I was going to earn, even though we just lost over $1 million and we had this massive mortgage and we could lose our house, I said to my husband, 10% is going straight off the top to charity. He was like, you can't do that. And I said, I can, because I need it to be bigger than just us to be successful. I was fighting for more people than just my family. And that was an extra push for me.
I hear you. That's also the heart of an influencer, isn't it? Because you want something more bigger than yourself. And I've read that's what drives a lot of influencers, especially at a global level, Catherine. So well done. Catherine, I want to talk a little bit about your book. You've written about, you've got this great book out called The Million Dollar Handshake. Can you tell our listeners about it?
Look, I never was going to write a book, and I kept being pushed into it. It was just amazing, the different situations that happened. I was even in a taxi coming back one day. I'd just been filmed at a TV studio, and he said, ma'am, I hope you don't mind, but are you writing a book? And I said, no. He said, I think you are writing a book. And I said, oh, look, I might write a book. And he said, well, I just need to tell you, I'm really excited. I'm going to tell my wife today I had an author in the car. And I'm like, I was getting these messages from everywhere, because once again, it wasn't really about me, and I didn't want to write it for me, but I missed a couple of deals. And in the meantime, when I started my business in 2009, by 2010, I started working with young girls. I volunteered half a day each week that had been bullied or from broken homes or maybe even abused, and they were going through a Shine program. So I was just helping empower girls, for that freedom to act and to protect and look after themselves and each other. And during that time, I met a lady who knew me. I used to teach Sunday school when my children were little, and she asked if I would help fundraise for Watoto for orphans in Uganda. And I said, sure. So I started fundraising, and we used to fundraise $40,000 a year. We'd go over every 2 years. We'd build houses. We'd buy sewing machines. We'd help show them and buy seeds for them to plant and to help themselves. And it started to become very exhausting for me, fundraising, because, 4 events a year on top of running a big business and looking after a family was getting exhausting. Then all of a sudden I had this thought, imagine if I write this book that I keep getting asked to write, because I've been speaking on the $1 Million Handshake for, I think, 2 years before I wrote the book. And imagine if a third of that went to charity, I would never have to fundraise again. So my big vision out there in the world, everybody, if you're listening, is to sell 1 million copies, because that $1 million is going to change the world. I only get $3 a book. So my husband once again goes, you can't give away a third of that. I said, I can, because what if I didn't write the book? We wouldn't even have it coming in. So I said, I'll give you a promise. 1/3 can go to you. I said 1/3 is going to go to our orphans and our women and some of the poorest people in the world. And I said, and the other third is going to go back into education. And I'm writing an education program now that I'm going to get, I'll be working with leaders in Africa from Watoto to deliver to the villages for worth, to unlock their worth. So I'm kind of really, really excited about that. Of course, we haven't sold 1 million yet, but we have sold 10,000 worldwide. And I have been told that we now have publishers, Hachette, they're one of the biggest companies in Australia. We've got them being delivered by Orion to all the Commonwealth countries. It sold out in India last year. It's just gone into its second reprint in India and Australia. It's being printed in Taiwan and Taiwanese. Next year, they've already bought the rights, and they've already bought the rights in Vietnam, to produce it in Vietnamese. So the book, and I believe the success of the book, well, number one, the content's amazing. And at the end of
What
each
would
chapter,
be
we've got online.
yeah,
At the end of each, sorry?
I was just wondering, Catherine, what would be that single sort of goal that you would want people to take away when they read your book, The Million Dollar Handshake?
Yes. Yes. So each chapter, there's the $1 Million Handshake, there's body language, there's mindset, there's behaviors, there's connecting and communicating, and then there's cross-cultural connections and the conscious connection framework. So at the end of each of these chapters, there's also online content. So the whole purpose of the book is to enable you to have that self-confidence and understand your soft skills, understand what you transfer in a nanosecond to other people, how you can create win-wins instead of win-losers. So the book really is an empowerment book that you can use for sales, that you can use for service, that you can use for leadership. It really is about the way that we can lead ourselves each day more positively.
And what I'm also picking from your feedback just now is that I'm yet to pick up the book myself. I'm excited to do that. Is Catherine, The $1 Million Handshake? Correct me if I'm wrong. It's a lot about focusing on delivery and how you package yourself and put yourself out there in the marketplace. Is that right?
Yes, and how you think, how you prepare yourself. Yes.
So coming to that point, I think that is so important because in communication, even when I train and coach around the world, I've always told people, don't focus solely or more on content. It's equally or more important in how you deliver your body language. So that leads me to my next question, Catherine. Why is understanding body language so important in communication?
It's just huge. A lot of people, I'm doing a full day talk tomorrow on body language in Sydney. And the questions I ask is, I want to read somebody else. I want to be able to see what they're saying. But it's not about the other person to start with, it's about you. Because if you want to read their body language, it means they can read yours. Now, we react in 1/25th of a second before we speak. So it means if we bring more consciousness forward, we can be more conscious of our action before we open our mouth. 55% of what we say is through our body. The 10 most watched TED Talks, they diagnosed them and found out that they had the best body language in them. And with the $1 Million Handshake, it's helped many women because a lot of women aren't as confident going in for the handshake. And what happens is 50% of deals are made on the way that, through your first connection and the way someone feels about you. Or once you understand this, how you can make someone feel about you so that you can create a win-win.
That makes absolute sense. I also want to ask you, Catherine, you speak about the conscious connection framework. What is that exactly?
Yes, so I just mentioned that as one of our chapters. So I've created some IP, and in 2017, we won an Asia Pacific award for it for training. And it's made up of 3 parts, which is our body language. So starting to be conscious about our body language, what it says, what these movements are that we do, because you know what? You can read all about body language, but until you get real feedback one-to-one on it, then you start to understand what your body's saying and what your energy is saying. The second part is the mindset and being really mindful. So as leaders and communicators, we need to start thinking about how often do we need to wash a towel? Can we be saving water? What about the plastic? Being conscious of who is the person I'm about to meet, being mindful of where I am and being mindful of the country that I'm in. So I think the mindset plays a very, very big part. So we may not feel confident, but we put our shoulders back, we put our head up, and then in our mind, we're starting to feel a lot more confident as well. So we need to be more mindful of the people we're meeting, of our environment, and of our body language. And then the third part to this, so we have body language, mindset. The third part is behaviors. And I train in this To me, it is one of the most important things, and the reason that I've been able to work in Saudi Arabia, UAE, India, China, Hong Kong, you name it, is because I understand behaviors of people. And even their behaviors and their reactions let you know who they are. Are they fast talkers, thinkers? Do they need to spend time to get to know you? All these different things come through, even in those first 7 seconds, even through our website and our emails, once you start to understand the signal. And the reason that I look at these 3 things, the body language, being mindful, using our mindset correctly, and our behaviors, is to create what I call a level playing field for win-win results. And this is where we can connect and communicate with anyone, anywhere for success.
Yes, Catherine. And this has got me thinking. I'm thinking about, the hot conversation globally. Everybody's talking about personal branding. And the whole challenge about personal branding, the goal is about bridging the distance or reducing the distance between how we see ourselves and what we're ultimately projecting, the perspective of who we are in someone else's mind. So it's coming back to what you're saying about being more mindful and making the unconscious connections you're making more deliberate, more conscious. Because you know what, Catherine, there have been moments where I'd enter a room, a boardroom or a business meeting, and I'm sitting across the room from somebody in the table, and I could still feel their energy. And it's like you're communicating across the room even without speaking. So it really reinforces what you're telling us today about body language. So I was just thinking about that. Catherine, before, you also mentioned China and how you've expanded to global territory. What was the secret ingredient to growing your business? I ask you this because a lot of the people listening today, they're women in business, women who have an idea to get into business, or women in corporate, or just anybody, men and women around the world. So they want to know how they can better position themselves to be an influencer in whatever area. So when you were telling me about China, I was thinking the first question is a language barrier. I was thinking business etiquette differences. And I was also thinking, Catherine, can you teach us today what are some of those tips you can give us with regards to overcoming that fear mindset, which could hold you back from growing a business?
Okay, so that's a day's training, But
I'm asking the best.
So the secret ingredient, I truly believe, for growing my business started with understanding what my body was saying. So I grew my business face to face. So even though we may connect with someone sees us on LinkedIn, we will send them all that information. You may then end up on Skype or Zoom with somebody. So you've still got that body language. And I particularly ask people to meet face to face over the internet or in person. And I found all my business came in China through the face to face. So it's worth going to the country that you want to work in, listen to the people, and then be very, very conscious. Be very conscious of who you're meeting, what the culture is, and what your body's saying. Now, I started working in this over 20 years ago. So, and I topped sales in every business that I was in, but then I left the workplace to look after children. So coming back into the workplace, all these skills were exactly the same. These soft skills have not changed. So I truly believe the more that you understand yourself, which means you need to profile yourself, you need to understand your DISC, and I can send you through a link for behaviors for everyone to have a look at. I think it's so important because once you understand yours, you can understand other people's, and then you can learn to connect with them, because 25% of people will be like you and will love meeting you and want to connect and do business with you. But what are you going to do about the other 75%? And this is where it's very, very important. And even in the poorest countries, even in Africa, we have around 95% of small businesses run by women. So being really aware of why does one do so much better than the other, it's our body language. It's the smile, it's the eye contact, it's stopping to let that person you're with feel $1 million. Even if you think this person can't help your business and you want to talk to someone else, give them your full attention, because my biggest deals came from the person that couldn't employ me for it, didn't need me for that job, but they recommended me to someone who could. So everyone has always been my $1 million customer.
I love that perspective. I love how you zone in on that. So that also sort of reinforces the, the power of mindset. My last question to you is, I have just two more questions to go. So one before the last is, Catherine, you've gone into global and you're transforming people and business. So with that said, how has being a global player, a global influencer, and a woman affected your family today?
Yes, great question. Now, I do get asked this because I have two boys and a girl. My eldest is 26, and then the next one's 24, and then I have a girl who's 22. So having to be catapulted back into business 10 years ago, my daughter was only 12. And it was a time when girls really need their mums too. So I found it really, really difficult. And all I've been able to do is to make sure when something important was happening that I was there for it, that I booked myself out, and that I treated her like my $1 million customer. And with my staff and my boys too, if something was happening at school. And with my staff, I did the same thing. So if they had a child at a sports day, they weren't allowed to come into work. They had to go and watch their child play the sport. So because sometimes I was working 12-hour days, I believed in integration. So that means that I didn't separate everything. And if I was really busy, my husband would bring dinner down to the office with the family, and they'd all have dinner with me. And I really loved those times too, because it meant the family was appreciating what I was doing. And it hasn't always been easy. And I remember my first big job in China, we had 350 people coming to an event, and we found out my daughter was graduating. She was year 12, and it was the same weekend. So about a month out, I had to write to Hong Zhengzong, the Director General of the Foreign Ministers and Translators Association in China, and I had to ask him if we would be able to change the event by a week as I needed to be in Australia. And you know what? I have this thing. One other big thing. Ask and you shall receive. Ladies, if you don't ask, we can't receive it. And that's one thing I've been so grateful for in my life, that I haven't been shy. I must have heard that at a Bible lesson and thought that was brilliant. So I've used it forever.
I absolutely love it. So ask anyway, right? Don't think about what happens. Just you got to go for it.
Ask anyway. You don't know. I mean, and what if they said no? Then it would mean no. Then you make your other choice. But what happens if they say yes? Well, then that's fantastic.
But Catherine, can I just ask you, maybe there's a data point to this, but what is the usual success rate if you ask anyway? Would you happen to have a data point on that, just to encourage our listeners? Because I'm sure if they're women, they're going to second guess. They're going to be like, oh, I'm not sure if I could. Any data we
have? Yes, look, I don't have any data on that, because I think it's an individual experience. Not everyone asks. But I think everyone could start to think themselves when they did ask, 60% of the population will hold themselves back and make up a story that that person couldn't do it anyway. And I think it's a time to stop making up stories to what other people would think or what other people would say. I think the only way we know is through communication, and that's taking the first step and asking.
Catherine, personally, I've asked questions too, and it's I could still remember vividly. It would just catch me by surprise when the other person, who I thought might say no, said yes. And when that happens, it's so liberating, it's so empowering because we asked anyway. We chose to ask. And with that, Catherine, the final question for our audience. I'm so excited, drum roll. So this is what I do with all the global influencers on the show. What is your heart talk empowerment advice, that one big message you want to leave with our audience today on the show?
Believe in yourself. When you believe in yourself, others will believe in you too.
Lovely. Thanks, Catherine, for being on today's show, Heart Talk, and we wish you and your family wonderful journeys ahead, absolute success, and lots of blessings coming your way. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, just to remind you, if you want to find this podcast, just log into www.womenempowered.shop. It's www.womenempowered.shop. Catherine, great having you today.
Thank you so much for having me. And women, keep empowering each other and empower yourself every day. Speak soon.
Bye.
Bye.